Assalamu alaikum. There is probably no better time to discuss the topic of Islamophobia more than now. There is a noticeable increase in the inflammatory rhetoric against Islam and Muslims in the West and in the United States in particular. Tonight, we will be talking about Islamophobia and how we can achieve justice, equality, and fairness for American Muslims. The rise in Islamophobia and hate crimes against Arabs and Muslims is not something new. According to the Washington Post, FBI uniformed directors have claimed that from the years 1996 to 2000, there have been less than 100 hate crimes against Muslims. However, in the year 2001, that number went up to 450. The Washington Post also states that hate crimes are 5 times more common today than at any point before 9/11. It's even more disappointing to have the issue of Islamophobia being adopted and endorsed by politicians seeking the Oval Office. Leading 2016 presidential candidate Donald Trump says, "The United States will have absolutely no choice but to close down some mosques where some bad things are happening. Nobody wants to say this, and nobody wants to shut down religious institutions or anything, but you know you understand it. A lot of people understand it. We're going to have no choice." Another presidential candidate, Ben Carson, said that he would not advocate that we put a Muslim in charge of this nation. However, Article 6 of the Constitution clearly states, "No religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States." There are still, however, politicians who stick to the Constitution and the values that our democracy was based on. Bernie Sanders, another presidential hopeful, was asked about Islamophobia, and he responded by saying, "If we stand for anything, we have to stand together and end all forms of racism within this country." Former Secretary of State and another presidential candidate, Hillary Clinton, stated that assumptions and fear don't keep us safe, but they hold us back. The current holder of the Oval Office, President Obama, said, quote, "that experience guides my conviction that partnership between America and Islam must be based on what Islam is and not what it isn't. And I consider it part of my responsibility as President of the United States to fight against negative stereotypes of Islam wherever they appear." Now, allow me to introduce to you our guest speaker for the night, who is an expert on the issue of Islamophobia. Dr. Hatem Bazian is co-founder, senior faculty, and academics affairs chair at Zaytuna College. He is also a senior lecturer in the Department of Near Eastern and Ethnic Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. Dr. Bazian is also a visiting professor in religious studies at St. Mary's College of California and advisor to the Religion, Politics, and Globalization Center at UC Berkeley. In 2009, he founded the Center for the Study of Documentation of Islamophobia at UC Berkeley. Dr. Bazian is on the board of several organizations, including the Islamic Scholarship Fund and Muslim Americans for Palestine, for which he is also the founding president. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Hatem Bazian.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First, let me thank the organizer Al-Madinah Institute for hosting me and having this program. We didn't plan for all the events on Islamophobia to take place for this event to be such a critical event. But what I'm hoping to go through with you is to show the level of Islamophobia and some of the critical response that needs to be put together at this time and moving forward to reverse this current trend that has become a global phenomenon, not only here in the United States, but also across the world. Now, I want to first take a look at these 3 documentaries. These 3 documentaries have been used for educational purposes across the country. The Terrorist Among Us actually was shown on BBS public broadcast showing this as being objective, even though it has been put together by Islamophobes. You have the Obsession documentary, where in 2008, 28 million copies were distributed to influence the election. The Third Jihad, likewise, is another documentary that has been widely used. And a combination of these three have been used to train police officers on understanding Islam, some of the security organizations, and also some political parties, in particular the Republican and the Tea Party. Usually they use one of these videos, and then they'll have a lecture about Islam and the threat of Islam. So this is about mass communication and outreach to a broader American society about demonization of Islam and Muslims. Now, if you go to any bookstore today, and if you go to bookstores in the airports, you will find a cluster of these books. The Muslim Mafia. This is basically saying that the Muslims had a plan to take over America. You have the infiltration that targets our young people who are in internship in congressional office and Senate offices. But they say that these are individuals that are infiltrating America. And 4 congressmen called for an investigation on the role played by these interns in congressional offices. And once again, this book is widely available. Many of these are on the top 10 list of the New York Times bestsellers. I think we need to open the door for the... All right. All right. Glenn Beck, it's all about Islam. It actually has been on the top New York best 10 top sellers for a number of weeks. Now it's down to 3rd or 4th place, meaning hundreds of thousands of copies are being sold and used as a way to educate the American public about Islam. How Obama embraces Islam's Sharia agenda. It's another book that likewise is one of those top sellers. And Andrew McCarthy has this large number of books that demonizing Islam and Muslims, and again, it's widely available. Terrorist Hunter. Now, in general, it's very rare that you actually have an anonymous publishing a book, supposedly by a respectable publishing house, and distributed and reviewed as anonymous. So this is a person who's claimed that they went underground, meaning they pretended to be Muslim, and went to Muslim events to say that the Muslims were all are conspiring to undertake terrorist activities or speak in negative ways relative to America. So this is another book by Anonymous. And in my academic work, I have never seen any book being published under the title Anonymous. You have pseudonyms, but this is just showing the acceptability that there is a respectable publishing house puts out a book that is widely sold with no author behind it. It's just, how are you going to cite this book? Anonymous, and then you put the title of the book as the reference. Now, the documentary Third Jihad is an important one because if you look at the face and the eyes of the person in the documentary, you should know this person. It's actually President Obama. This theories that the right-wing and the Islamophobes basically say that Obama is a closet Muslim and he's practicing taqiyya. And that is an important term now that is very frequent. Even on CNN, you'll have news people asking you, so what about taqiyya? And what it does is that as a Muslim, if you speak by claiming that you're engaged in taqiyya, then your statements are really can be taken. You essentially are lying for what you are talking about. So the claim that Obama is a closet Muslim, and as the situation in Egypt developed, and the Arab Spring turned to be an Arab winter, increasingly he was being labeled as being part of the Brotherhood movement. So much so that some of the articles written around in the US about him made it to Egyptian press, and the Egyptians were saying statements that come from the Islamophobes about Obama, even though that had no foundation whatsoever. And that tells you that the information are no longer contained to one place, but rather is circular and claiming that he is a closet Muslim. And now this image, if you see behind him, they're putting behind him the ISIS flag. So in essence, and this is where the assault on Obama to say he's soft on terrorism and soft on ISIS, because essentially he's one of them. And so this you find it's not unique. You find it actually in Tea Party gathering, right-wing gathering, as stickers, as pens. So it's not on the fringe, but rather part of a cluster of political optics that are using these type of images. Similarly, these images of Obama that likewise are widely used in terms of representing him as T.A. Lawrence of Arabia, once again comparing him to Osama bin Laden. This is when he attempted to take on the Palestine issue, they represented him as being Yasser Arafat, right, with the Palestinian outfit and the hitler that he is wearing. Now, the first such work on Islamophobia dates back to Stephen Emerson. Right? Many of us dismiss Stephen Emerson's work in relation to Oklahoma bombing. We said, no, he's just a French person. He's working just by himself and does not represent a steady development. Now, what Emerson started now covers the spectrum. Right? So Stephen Emerson's work in relation to demonizing Muslims, the individuals and organizations have become a whole establishment with 37 organizations at the core and 32 other groups. So literally there are 69 groups nationally that are working day in and day out to demonize Muslims. And many of them are connected in terms of funding, and the board of directors shared, and essentially you could point and see who's who among this network of individuals. David Horowitz had a whole cluster of groups and projects that target faculty and the campuses in order to actually push out any type of research that would challenge the Islamophobes, because the universities should be doing research, and if the research shows that this threat that is being spoken of is unsubstantiated, essentially has to be attacked. So you attack the academics and individuals under the rubric that they're liberals and they're responsible for the lack of defense of America. So David Horowitz runs another website also, Campus Watch, and recently another website that was set up, which is the Canary Mission, that targets any individual and group that speaks on Palestine and have anything related to Palestine in their organizing on campus. Now, if you take all of this together, most bookstores in the United States today have numerous Islamophobic content with very limited number of legitimate, high-quality materials. So you take it actually, if you go to the airport and you go to the general readership and the religious section, you'll find most of the books that are there are coming either from the Islamophobes or those who are apologetic to Islamophobic discourse, meaning they are engaging in reflecting what the Islamophobes have said. Another cluster is ex-Muslims. So for example, you have Ershad Manji, Ayan Hirsi books in there. So on the one hand, you have the Islamophobes and those who reflect Islamophobic content, and then there's ex-Muslims who are funded by the Islamophobes, representing the spectrum of what you find in the bookstores. Meaning the general audience, the general American public, access in terms of what's available in terms of written materials, what's available in documentary. The documentaries that I saw, you could actually access them on Netflix. They send them for free to university libraries. So when you do a Google search about documentaries about Islam, most often you're going to get the Islamophobic content coming up first. When you do a search, a Google search of Muslim groups, individuals, and organizations, the Islamophobic content actually appears because it's part of their strategy to cross-reference each other. So there's actually an investment in that part. Now, obsession documentary is very important. I said in 2008, 28 million copies were distributed. And they were distributed specifically in swing states to try to impact the election during the Obama running for president. Now, in the obsession, it began to compare the threat of Islam, or the conceived threat of Islam, with Nazis before World War II. Now, if you look today, every time that Islam is spoken, they're speaking about Islam as a fascist, right? Having fascist tendency. That was a deliberate effort to undertake this process to make Islam not part of our religious fabric, but actually as a threat to the United States and a threat to society in general. Now, who produced the documentary Obsession? Who is funding the third jihad? Right? Me and you don't have $18 million in our pocket to go and distribute 28 million copies, put it in the Sunday newspaper. And none of us can actually put an ad in the newspaper. We have to possibly rally nationally just to put one ad for one page, one day, right, on any issue. Now, this was an effort of 28 million copies that were put in Sunday newspapers and distributed across the country at a particular time during the election. Now, the organization that is responsible is Emet. Emet in Hebrew means truth. This is a group organized seminars in Capitol Hill, and they regard themselves as intellectual revolutionaries. This group is connected to a set of individuals that are decisively coming from the pro-Israel cluster and grouping, meaning that they have a foreign policy interest of demonizing Muslims for a foreign policy objective here in the United States, relative to their particular way of wanting to maintain U.S. unconditional support to Israel, and by engaging in such demonization. This Emet organization is headed by Sarah Stern, who began her activism on Israel issues in opposition to the 1993 Oslo. So you're not talking about yesterday or because of Paris, right? The strategy that is being deployed has been almost 20 years plus in the making. We, on the other hand, react to the events that took place, and we think it's the events that are driving the strategy. Is the other way around. The strategy is already there. These events spike their ability to push the agenda, and immediately the laws that they have been contemplating are pushed into the congressional offices, and immediately you have a law being introduced. Right? So you're dealing with a cluster of groups that have a strategy and a network working, while we're often only reacting to events. Now, if you look at the board of directors of Emet, you'll find it's a who's who of the major neocons, Islamophobes, pro-Israel individuals, from Jane Kilpatrick, Daniel Pipes, Merv Wurmser, Vice President Dick Cheney's spouse, Frank Gaffney, James Woolsey. Many of these individuals also were played a critical role in the invasion in Iraq. Many of these individuals, if you remember, the clear break strategy developed in 1998, these are the individuals that were there, that were part and parcel of this development. The Clarion Fund, EMIT, is connected to another group, which is the Clarion Fund, that provides the address and the funding source for much of these activities. Both the Clarion Fund and Aish Hatura are headed by two Israeli-Canadian brothers, Raphael and Ephraim Shor, meaning that they are the ones that are providing the infrastructure, financial infrastructure, and the Clarion Fund, once again, it's that institution that is providing the resources. So what you're seeing is these links and connections that are being set up. So EMIT is the Endowment for Middle East Truth. Clarion Fund shared the same New York address with Aish Hatura. Aish Hatura is located in settlements in the West Bank. Right, so the funding actually is coming from Aish Hatura, and their focus on the threat of radical Islam is the same as that posed by Nazi Germany. So that's their driven strategy and approach in terms of what they're working on relative to the Muslim community. Now, speaking before the convention of the American Jewish Congress on October 21st, 2001, Daniel Pipes said the following, and I think this is one of the most important statements for us to understand the strategy of the Islamophobes. Just if you're here, just you need to understand the strategy from that perspective. He says, I worry very much from the Jewish point of view that the presence and the increased stature and affluence and enfranchisement of American Muslims will present true dangers to American Jews. And so you see the progression? The presence, meaning that you're here in this country, is a problem as a Muslim. That your increased stature, you're beginning to be lawyers, doctors, professors, business owners, engage in all types of activities that is beginning to have a presence for the Muslim community with a stature. Some of you are running for office, some of you are making it to Congress. That constitutes a problem in the long run. Once again, he's looking down the line of what this will mean in 10, 15, 20 years. Third, that you're becoming to be affluent. Our net income, purchasing powers, the resources that we have is beginning to show that you are an affluent community that is able to begin to shift its priority. And the last part is that you actually are beginning to be enfranchised, meaning you go out and vote. Right? You go and vote, meaning that your participation in the political process presents a true danger because it might have in the long run a possibility of shifting the policy of the U.S. away from maintaining its position of unconditional support to Israel. Now, M.J. Rosenberg, who formerly worked for the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, said that they believe that the more acceptance there is of Muslims here at home, the less reflexive hatred there will be for Muslims abroad. And that, in their view, reduces America's sympathy for Israel. So what the Islamophobes want to produce, they want to produce reflexive hatred toward you in here. And if there is reflexive hatred toward you in here, when bombs are dropped on Muslims abroad, nobody will care because you are a hated group, and as such, you deserve what is coming to you. So, Islamophobia is about producing reflexive hatred. Reflexive hatred meaning you hear Islam and you immediately respond with hate. Right? So we already have these cases. We have somebody in New York, a taxi driver, and the person goes into the taxi, are you a Muslim? And the person says yes, and he stabs him. Reflexive hatred. So the operative is just similar when you have a psychological conditioning. Right? Psychological conditioning, you have these trigger words or trigger things that can happen, and you immediately make this trigger the operable way to create this reflexive hatred. So there is a strategy of creating this reflexive hatred, and so far we have the polling data says that only 23% of the American public has favorable view of Muslims. 23%. Meaning 77% of the American public have negative views of Muslims. worse than North Korea. North Korea actually have 71%. So we're competing with North Korea. So North Korea is at 71%, we're at 77 negative perspective relative to where we are. So meaning the Islamophobic campaign has been successful and has registered the needed reflexive hatred, and that's where Muslims are at in terms of today. Now, it's not only Israeli interests that are being served, there are other interests. Right-wing forces in Western societies. In many parts of Europe, the neo-Nazi right-wing groups are winning elections by monetizing Islamophobia at the ballot box. So today in France, Le Pen is actually the leading party for the presidential election. If it happens today, Marie Le Pen will win 31% of the votes. Holland will only register about 28%, and Sarkozy is 24%. Marie Le Pen party, which is the Le Pen party, comes from neo-Nazi fascist group. Her father was known to collect Nazi memorabilia. He was arrested and prosecuted by the French government for being a Nazi sympathizer. And now is actually the leading party in France. They pushed the hijab ban. They pushed a lot of different policies relative to Muslims. In England, you have the Independent Party that likewise have won seats in the European Parliament. Dutch, the Netherlands, likewise, the neo-Nazi groups have won the elections. And across Europe, this is the case. In the United States, the 2010 election was the first time where Islamophobia was monetized into votes. Meaning that politicians running for election used hate against Muslims to actually create a wedge issue and bring voters to their side of the ledger. Now, race and racism has been part of American history for a long time. And race tends to gain votes. So it's not that the Republicans and the Tea Party are all of a sudden discovered racism. They just recycled one group after the other. They've been working on targeting African Americans for the longest period of time in terms of the Republican Party and politicians. So racism, wedge issues are being used by right-wing politicians both here and in Europe. Military-industrial complex. The business of war is war, and the war of business is business. If you don't have a projected enemy after the collapse of the Soviet Union, how are you going to be able to sell all these new weapons that you need to recycle and continue to sell in the billions of dollars? Right? So now we are in a securitization economy. Securitization economy, that every part of the economy is actually being invested in securing our homeland and creating security. So you have cameras everywhere. You have a police force for everywhere. You go to college, there's police force. There's a bomb squad that is being hired by the police. You go to a 7-Eleven, there's a police officer out there. You go to a shopping center, there's a whole police force with maybe 36 cameras. You go to the airport, just count how many police forces are there. Yet we are feeling fearful with even all this multiplicity of security forces. It's not driven by anything other than money and resources. There's a whole business that have developed around this security apparatus. And just to tell you, you are the driving stimuli for this economy. Whenever I fly and go through the TSA, I tell them, you need to thank me. And the person looks at me, I said, you know, being a Muslim is a stimulant to the economy because you're getting your job because of me. In reality, that's a whole stimulistic part of the military-industrial complex that is there, that is driving this particular economy. And then you have the right-wing Christian groups who are thinking of end-of-time scenarios, and Islamophobia fits because they see us as the army of Satan. I was, for punishment, I was on the 900 Club radio show, and the person literally was saying about that, this is the realm of Satan. I said, why are you talking to me? Aren't you afraid that I might, corrupt you being the realm of Satan? Right? So literally, it works into this creating the end of time scenario, and in essence, that part fits Islamophobia fits well. The last one is Arab authoritarian regimes. If you happen to read some of the Arab press today, it's full with Islamophobic content. The battle or the conflict over secularism or not secularism in the Muslim world have taken all type of Islamophobic shape, and some of the Arab regimes are actually sending their experts to the US and Europe to tell them about the threat of Islam. In essence, because they don't want any change to take place in their own countries, so they send people to speak bad about Islam and provide their expertise on the demonization of Islam. And that's a unique circumstance these days, and even some of the people that you would think would be more intelligent are actually helping demonizing Muslims in the West by saying, yes, we know them better, trust us, we could actually give you a real run on what these Muslim, terrorist radicals, and then when they use that, they put a brush. Everyone that disagrees with them becomes part of this Islamic threat that is being talked about. Now I'm gonna just push a little bit on this. We think that it's not as bad in here, right? We think that maybe we're just having just a little bit of unease about the circumstances. We already have a number of individuals that are actually speaking about the internment for Muslims. Right? The Japanese internment, there were 110,000 Japanese that were interned. Right? So now the discussion, you already have Trump saying he's going to close mosques. Ben Carson doesn't want to allow Muslims to run for the presidency. In the 2000 election, we had a number of individuals said that they would not appoint a Muslim for any public office. And now you have individuals that are writing about really interning Muslim. This gets us into the media and how the media represents Islam. This is what we call the 5 pillars of media in relation to Islam. 9/11 as an organizing frame for understanding Islam and Muslims. Right? So everything about Islam and Muslims is to 9/11 and then you begin about Islam as if nothing happened. So when I teach my classes at Berkeley, I put 9/11 on the board and say, tell me what's 9/11. And everybody speaks about 9/11, 2001. I said, well, I'm talking about 9/11, 1609. And people say, what is the date 9/11, 1609? Well, 9/11, 1609 is the day that the Moriscos were expelled from Spain. 650,000 Muslims were expelled in Spain, and the first few days, about 3,000 Muslims were killed. So how you select the date becomes a way to frame the conversation. This is not to rationalize, but to actually say that anytime that you narrowly focus on 1.5 billion people through a single event, you're actually already removing everything else other than that single event. So we have to be clear not to fall into this strategy in terms of media, violence, terrorism, fundamentalism. All these words are now American words or American language. You'll have a whole session on CNN of Islamophobes, CNN Islamophobes discussing all these terms without a person actually speaking from the community that is involved that actually can speak from their own perspective. That has its ramifications, its consequences. Veiling and Islamic patriarchy is constantly the focus. So every show, yesterday Bill Maher on HBO, just a complete nonsense. Right? He said that what we need to speak is about the Muslims who are being terrorized. And I thought that he might say something else. He said, yes, every woman that is living in a Muslim house is being terrorized by her husband. Right? And then he went on to enumerate almost everything. So he said, well, 1.6 billion Muslims, they really are all horrible. Now, Bill Maher actually assumed that he's a comedian. This is also the left. It is not comedy or satire when you poke fun of those who are in a state of weakness. is actually bullying, civil society bullying. That's what Al-Madinah is taunting and bullying a community that is being demonized. Satire and comedy is to poke fun of the powerful. When you are actually poking fun of those who are weak, that's not actually satire, that's bullying. And yet is actually being given the stage to bully on a regular basis without any challenge to it whatsoever. Then the framing of Islam in the West, another frame. And then the Middle East. Everything in the world of Muslims is only Middle East. What was it? Last week there was a report about Afghanistan, and the report says in the Middle East, Afghanistan, and went on. So the Middle East, anywhere where Muslims are, becomes the Middle East. This is not to demean the Middle East, and not to speak against, but this gets us to the framing that it's a different space, a different place. The Middle East is a unique cluster, and all Muslims are basically to be thought of as a byproduct of this. So Michelle Milton had a whole book published and promoted widely about in defense of the internment. We actually had another book promoted on defense of internment, meaning that thinking about what we need to do is not all the Muslims, but to gather a large enough group that needs to be interned to defend America. Now this is what we're doing in terms of our work, the Islamophobia Studies Center. Most of the work that has been done on Islamophobia, or Muslims speaking about dealing with Islamophobia, they try to show people how good Muslims are. And I have no problem with people showing how Muslims are good and that they're good people. But I'm sorry, that's not going to actually change or alter the Islamophobia. It's not. To show that Muslims are like you is not going to alter or change Islamophobia. The evidence is the following. If you think showing that you are a good person and telling people how you look like him, I would actually ask our African American 40 million to come and tell us how that worked for them. Right? There's 40 million African Americans. They've been added at least, from the end of the Civil War. I'm not going to take before that. From the end of the Civil War till today, African Americans have been the leading edge in cultural production, have been the leading edge in comedy, have been the leading edge in fashion, have been some of the best scientists that have come about. Set aside athletics, some of the best athletes in all sports except hockey. I think there's too much whiteness on the ice, but that's a separate issue. Right? Some of the best directors. So if the evidence we think as Muslims, if we just tell them how good we are, they will let us and realize that it's wrong to engage in Islamophobia. Most Muslims will say, we're going to go and tell you about 5 pillars of Islam. That from a social science, sociology, and political analysis, as well as ethnic studies, is not going to work. The reason is the following, what's happening is the following. Somebody took their fist and hit you in your face. And your response is the following. You went, run out, and tried to get a plastic surgery because your face is ugly. Right? And you come back and you tell him, how's my face right now? And he hits you again. So you go and look for another plastic surgeon. Now more so, the press reports that your face got in the way of his fist. Right? The Fox News says, it's your face that got in the way of his fist. You actually intervened by putting your face in the place that he was able to hit you with your fist, and therefore they're going to take you to court to compensate his fist because he had some owie that got out from his fist. The problem is the following: if somebody had the audacity to take their fist into your face, that's the problem. The problem is that we have civil society bullies. Right? For example, many of you have kids, right? Your kid comes home and says, you know, I have a bully in school. And this bully looked at my falafel sandwich, and they liked it, and they said, give me your sandwich. And what advice you tell them? Oh, why don't you get it to him? He might be hungry. Did you offer him your juice too? Okay, you just give him your sandwich. See what happens tomorrow. Next day comes, Mom, Dad, the bully asked for my bag. Oh, it's a nice bag. I know we bought it for you in what you call the shopping center. It was a Lacoste, nice bag. It's discount. Give it to him. He might like it and let you go. You give him your bag. Next day comes, you have a nice jacket, it's snowing, you spot a new nice jacket, for Eid. And the bully looks and says, oh, what's a nice jacket? Can I give me your jackets? So what advice do you give for your kid who's facing bullying? Stand up for yourself. That's your first advice, right? Why? Because you understand that the bully will not stop. Because the bully knows he just feeds on your weakness and feeds on your fear. And part of it is overcoming your fear. So we tell our kids, stand up for him, go and report to the teacher, right? Go to the principal, and then take a posse with you, right? Other kids, if nobody's responding, and meet them out on the yard. Yes, you're going to be hit, but at least they know that next time they're going to come with their fist, they're going to get a fist. Or they might get something else. That's the only way that you're going to stop a bully. If anybody discovered another, plan, I would be more than happy to listen to you. Or if your mom and dad are interested in giving more sandwiches, that's their problem. So what we have is a civil society, right, that has become full with civil society bullies all the way up to those who are running for president. Teaching people about 5 pillars of faith is okay, it's fine, but those are for people who have no business in one way or the other. For Islamophobia, you have to actually do the hard, deliberate work and to constitute some centers of power and influence to change and alter the perspectives that are there that is harming the community and also harming others as well. I say that the animosity toward President Obama, saying that he is a Muslim, is actually a polite way of using the N-word for people who are not able to use the N-word, so they feel at ease saying he's Muslim. They don't like having a black person making it to the White House. But they know they will possibly face consequences. They use his Muslimness as a signpost for their racism. So, in essence, we have to wake up and try to understand what's taking place. For impact, you have to have research. We have to have data. We have to have trainings. We have to have partnerships with groups and individuals that have effective. It's not about only 5 pillars of faith. It's about actually having a data. So you tell people, well, I feel that Muslims are under attack. If you go to any office here, I feel Muslims are under attack. What are they going to tell you? Where is the evidence? If a tree falls in the forest and nobody sees it or hears it, it really falls. Now I know Muslims try not to report because alhamdulillah, mashallah, it's okay. Just Allah will raise you in paradise. Where is i'qa wa tawakkal? So we have confused adab with reporting. So you have to report cases. You have to report what takes place. If somebody talks about your hijab, you have to report it. Why? Because that's the data. If we don't have data, we can't actually go and speak to people. The FBI crime record actually does not have Muslim cases listed. It's only a very limited number, about 400. That's just what If I ask my students, I'll get 400 reports of what happened to them just last week. How many of you, for the women, because I know that you're wearing that job, how many of you tell me, take off this rag from your head? Just raise your hand. How many tugged at your hijab? Like you're standing in line. How many told you go back home? Yeah. How many actually did not want to serve you and they looked at you as if you don't exist? Right? All these are forms of harassment that needs to be reported. Right? So, for Muslims who are applying for jobs with same identical qualification, in 24 times, after 24, the Muslims did not get the job. That's the research. They ran the same type of experiment they ran with African Americans. African American, with having all the potential, same qualification, same background, applies for a job, 24 out of 24, the white person got the job and the African American didn't get the job. So we're at that same point. Right? So that's data that you need. So far we've been publishing the only Islamophobia studies journal in the world. So literally, the only specialized journal, academic journal, that is published. And what we do right now is we also go to artists to give us original art that we would use as a cover. So to engage the art community, individuals who are studying art and artists to give us these. So each of the covers is an original piece of art that we use. And we distribute it for free, all of the material, because we have a case, we have an issue that we need to educate people about. So we get people to download it for free, and then we publish in publishing to libraries. So all of these are available for free at the UC Berkeley website, and you could access it, and we have a large number of downloads from across the globe for it. Now, we have also been dealing with this issue of Islamophobia on a global level. So we actually have been engaging on organizing a set of conferences, academic conferences and researcher conferences across the world. So we have in Berkeley, in Paris, actually we'll be in Paris in December 8th through the 15th for a conference in Paris, and then we go to London, Belgium, Spain. So there's 7 conferences to be held between the period of December 7th to the 15th. And in here, each area of the world have these specific ways that Islamophobia is being represented. So we have an Islamophobia project for the German-speaking world that covers Austria, Switzerland, and Germany. We have the French-speaking world that includes France, some of the French ex-colonies, as well as parts of Belgium. Then we also just came back from Montreal. We had a conference in Montreal in October. We have a conference being planned for Morocco, a conference in India, in Kerala, India, and in South Africa. This is a way for us to gather a large number of researchers to engage in Islamophobia and produce the literature that is needed, because we don't have the mass resources that these Islamophobic institutions have. So what we need is to depend on creating this mass network of researchers and scholars. And you could see the list of conferences and projects that we do, including summer schools and so on. The reason is that we need to create an area of study focused on Islamophobia, so to create Islamophobia studies, and people engage in writing and authoring, and these are either conferences in the making or conferences that are already being held. We also created a number of partner organizations to facilitate our work and relations. Asian Law Caucus, they have a National Security and Civil Rights Project, Center for Race and Gender, Council on American Relations, Arab and Muslim Diaspora, Grad Theological Union, International Center for Watching Violations of Rights. So all these are research organizations or groups that are working with us on the Islamophobia center studies in order for us to maximize the benefit for whatever research that we are coming out with. Now, right now we're working on, we're actually in the last stage of developing iPhobia app, which is an app that you're going to download to your phone, and anytime you have an Islamophobic incident, whether verbal, whether it's violent, whether any employment, you're able to report to us on the app this incident in the hope that we'll be able to collate the data. So you get a picture or the page like this on your phone, and then you'll enter the data and you give it to us. So we're hoping to release this on the AMP convention, and then after that in Mass ICNA convention by the end of December, so the people that work with us in Silicon Valley are developing the app for us to make reporting easy and accessible. And then the data that we get from all these reports will be submitted to congressional offices, issued through UC Berkeley, and also sent out to the FBI. If somebody is facing an emergency, they will be able to push the button and immediately call 911 from their app. So it's a reporting, but if you have emergency, the report does not benefit you at that moment. So it's not a report of trying to call 911. So there will be a button if you're facing any type of emergency as a result of Islamophobic attack, then we ask you to immediately dial 911. What we are able also as a result of this is to get the data that comes out, and if you want to have an actual text to give us exactly what takes place, that we will be able to receive it. What we're hoping is to be able to plot around the country where are the focal points where Islamophobic incidents are taking place, and then to be able to come back and do the needed research of what's happening, what type of materials are being promoted. Then we can go to public education institutions, public health institutions to say that you have a major problem, you have a concentration of racial attitudes, racial perspectives taking place from this area, and we could bring at least our way to intervene in what is occurring in those areas. So that's where data and research is actually can come. Now, our yearly budget, this is the budget for the center, so we're not asking you to fund us for the budget today, but we're coming here to ask for support and help. The university provides us very limited amount of funding, and what we need is the resources to be able to undertake this work. So far, we have put together a global affiliated faculty. So from Norway, from US, from Kerala, India, these are people that just work from law school, Texas, from UCLA, from Austria, Farid Hafiz, who does all of our work in the German-speaking world, Ramon, Maxwell Leon. So we have almost about 15 faculty level engagement across the board to be able to help and do the work. We're also reach out across from different ethnic and religious groups to be able to also do the work that is comparative in nature. So we're not only focused in a narrow spectrum, because racial attitudes have to be done in intersectionality in such a way to be able to be effective. Just last 2 weeks ago, we had a session at San Francisco General Hospital. Now, San Francisco General Hospital is an important institution because it's one of the first institutions that took on the AIDS epidemic. And the leadership of the hospital actually had us come and present. If you don't know Suzanne Barakat, her family is the one that the 3 Muslims that were shot. So she is also she's a resident right now at San Francisco General Hospital. And what we're asking for the public health institutions is to begin to take the public health effects of Islamophobia on individuals. And we're preparing a survey to be run in the spring to look at health effects on individuals that are facing or that have faced Islamophobia, either directly or also by means of watching the news also have an effect of individuals in their perspective and their well-being. So that survey is going to be run in the spring, and then we're having another session in the hospital in January, likewise to continue this work. I'm asking them to actually create a clinic within the hospital that begins to look at Islamophobia from a public health perspective. Because what we need is public institutions, civil institutions that take Islamophobia seriously and begin to look at it and examine it from different perspectives. So this is just something that literally a few weeks back we were able to do that. We have also another project on CVE and Islamophobia, how countering violent extremism has been solely focused on thinking of Muslims as a problem, rather than thinking of countering violence extremism in general. The FBI says that the primary threat for domestic terrorism comes from right-wing militias and neo-Nazi groups, not from Muslims. But yet all of the FBI and the security resources are directed at Muslims, and no resources in any way directed at the real threat that faces the United States and faces domestically, and there's almost a lack of attention paid to this. So we're having a conference in the law school that likewise are sponsoring. And then question of Palestine, we have also had sponsored a conference on censoring Palestine and how Islamophobia works in that as well. So literally we're asking for your help, anything that you can support the center's work. What we're trying to is to fund researchers that could do the work, to fund some of these surveys. Each one of them does take resources, and we've been going around asking the support of the community in building this institution. Part of the challenge is Islamophobia has an effect on people staying away from funding something that is deemed to be a little bit too sensitive, because people don't want to be affiliated or associated that they might be getting closer to a community that is being accused of being radicalized and so on. So inshallah, there are forms for you on the table. If you're able to do any type of help and support, jazakumullah khair, and assalamu alaikum. I'll take questions if you have questions. If you have any questions.
Do you not think that part of the American society is built upon this idea that we all are going to have a common hatred towards some sort of minority? First it was African Americans, then it was the Mexicans, now it's the Muslims. So in reality, we're not going to be able to just kill Islamophobia. They're just going to have to find someone else to hate.
Look, the history of America has been engaged in racism for.
Can you repeat the question?
The question is that there's, in essence, in America, there's this constant need to find somebody to express hatred toward. Today is Muslims. Prior to that is the Latinos, African Americans, and that's true. There's always going to constantly be some racists, right? So you're never going to be able to eliminate racism 100%. But what we want is for the racists not to dominate civil society, right? And that is doable. That is achievable. Is to make an Islamophobe, a racist, not to be respectable within the society. That, I think, where we need to focus. And I think the community needs to also work on political empowerment. People need to engage in the political process, register to vote, go out and empower yourself, visit your congressman, your senator, your city council in such a way that they know exactly what's your perspective. What are the percentage of the racists? It depends. Today, I think that we're seeing there's an increase. Why? Because you open on the news, and basically racism is being rationalized. You have a Trump standing and says, we want to throw out from our country 11 million Latinos. That is a racist, concept, because it's blaming the Latinos for whatever economic ills that we have, or saying it's the Chinese that are basically undermining our economy. You mean to tell me that the Chinese came and dragged our corporations to China? It's our corporations that realize outsourcing to China would get them more money. So take the jobs out of Ohio, take the jobs out of Michigan, and send them out abroad, so because you could pay somebody 15 cents on the hour. rather than paying them $45 an hour. So, but it's easy to blame the Chinese and to say it must be the Chinese who are conspiring and sitting, and you use racial terms for it.
Yeah, I have a comment.
تفضل.
And really, I applaud you for establishing that center. But I have a comment and I don't expect an answer.
No, go ahead.
Now, all what I have heard, or most of I have heard, is a culture of fear. And I personally don't believe we should live in a culture. If I look at the nation and I took notes, starting from Wikipedia and Wikipedia and the American Muslim community, what does United States care about the American Muslim community? I suggest to think out of the box. And one of your goals should be how Islamophobia is not good for the United States. If Islamophobia is good for the United States, so no matter what you do, we have no effect. So I suggest that maybe you want to think it over about the mission of the institute and try to look about the, and I applaud the Jewish community when we speak about something, they speak about the benefits to the United States and equality. Don't expect an answer.
Okay, thank you. That's your statements then. But once again, our project and our center is based on the studies of the ethnic communities that were here. That's why we're located in Ethnic Studies Department. So considerable investigation and examination, including of the Jewish case, went in it. And the Jewish community, while it speaks in the public thing, they do have an arm, which is called the ADL. And the ADL is specifically targeting anyone and any group and any organization that says anything negative about Jews. And they don't couch it and say it's not it's bad for Americans. They say this actually is harmful to Jewish Americans or is harmful to Jews. So they approach it in that way. Any other? Okay, Jazakumullah khair. Enjoy your dinner.
One question. Simple question. For your non-Muslim friends that you have, that you socialize with at college, every day, what are some practical things we can share without being like so blunt and saying you really hate Muslims? Like, how can you, I don't know, I guess like try to show them that you really care and you're really here for the long run and you want the best for America.
Well,
what are some practical things?
I think some practical thing is to have joint projects, joint programs. For example, in Metro, the work that we do, we focus on Islamophobia, but we trace, let's say, commemoration of Chinese Exclusionary Act period. So we'll have a session on comparisons between Muslim experiences and Chinese experiences. So we'll have a person from the Asian American Studies program, and a person from our program, and they'll have a discussion about the policies, procedures that have been used against the Chinese in 1882 and onward, and things that are being deployed against Muslims today. We make a comparison.
What about that's very academic. What about like your everyday usual Muslims? Whether you work,
I'm just telling you from my surrounding, the university. So that's one part of creating space for discussions and commonality. Then your other faculty members, your people on campus that are not part of the program, then going out to lunch, speaking with them. But you don't need to have Muslims are good or bad. Just there's a broader conversation. Focus on issues. What are the issues that are there? Posing the question is, do you really think that Trump and Ben Carson, in their perspective, really represent what the society needs at this time, and then have the conversation in those broader terms.
Sorry, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Hatem Bazian. So you have the donation forms, the support forms. Please, this is really an important mission that Dr. Hatem is taking on his shoulders. So please support him, support his center, and as much as you can. Then, inshallah, there will be some of the young brothers and sisters will pass by the tables. If you have a form ready, just give it to them, inshallah. Before we end, there are some announcements, and inshallah we'll do.
From Kansas.
Thank you all for being here with us on this great evening. Please make sure that you have contributed to this important research center. I firmly believe that the work of such a center will stand against the spread of Islamophobia. A few announcements. Please mark your calendars for Wednesday, as Sheikh Abdul Fattah Moro will be a guest to talk about Arab Spring. This event will be held at Central Academy at 6:30 p.m. the night before Thanksgiving. Also, please join the NWOPC on Sunday, November 22nd, tomorrow at noon, on the corner of Secor and Central, to stand in solidarity with the Syrian refugees. Let's send a strong message to Governor Kasich that we can't turn our back on the people who are in urgent need for shelter, safety, and protection. Refusing to resettle those who are fleeing in the terror in the Middle East compromises our American values and safety. In these hard times, we need to promote unity, not stir up hatred and division. We also will affirm our commitment to peace. If we want peace, we should urge the government to get out of the Middle East and stop bombing their land and people. Military action is not making the world any safer. In the contrary, more bombs and airstrikes are bringing more hatred, more violence, and more terrorist attacks. So please join us tomorrow, once again, noon, at the corner of Secor and Central, to promote this. Also, we encourage you all to attend the American Muslims for Palestine dinner in Chicago. It's Thanksgiving weekend, the 26th through the 28th. You can register here tonight for a 50% discounted price. If you're interested, please talk to Al-Madinah at the tickets table. Once again, thank you all for being here. Enjoy your dinner and enjoy your night.